So what I'd like to do, Bill, is I'd like to start with your story. I've heard it before. It's a really remarkable story. I don't know that we started all the way back at sort of where you were born, where you grew up, but I think if you can give us maybe a little compressed version of that, that'll just help us to understand who you are.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to. I was born in Princeton, New Jersey, a college town, actually a very old colonial college town. And so I had, in my younger years, I had the experience of living in a very rural environment outside of Princeton, but actually having access to a lot of history and a lot of opportunities that I might not have had if I hadn't grown up in a college town, and so that was great. It was wonderful. As it turns out, as I got through my younger years and actually moved into high school, I went away to a boarding school, actually, in New York, New York State, not New York City. And I had a great experience there. It was an all boys school. A lot of my experience there focused on my competitiveness in athletics, and that carried over, I think, as great training in my career. I've always been competitive and love competition, and as a result, kind of shaped different elements of my career. From that, I actually moved back to Princeton and went to Princeton University. I played sports at Princeton to satisfy my competitive needs. I was played and was captain of the Princeton lacrosse team my senior year, and so I got both a fantastic education as well as satisfying my urge to stay competitive in that context. From that point, actually, when I graduated from Princeton, I married my high school sweetheart, and I had worked summers in New York City because my father was an investment advisor there, and I wasn't in love with New York. In fact, I think going back to my more rural background and younger years, I read a book my senior year, and I think I startled my fiance. And that book was by Ken Kesey, an Oregon author, and it was Sometimes a Great Notion. And having grown up on the East Coast, I had this vision of what Oregon was going to be like, and so I, went to my fiance my spring of my senior year and said, "Hey, I've applied to business school at University of Chicago and been accepted. How would you feel if I deferred my acceptance and applied to business school at the University of Oregon?" And as you might imagine, she wanted to know if I was nuts, but she said, "Okay, if you're willing to do that, I'm all in." She had a year to finish at the University of Pennsylvania, and so she said, "I'll apply to transfer, and if I get in, and you get in, then let's go." And so 3 days after we were married, the summer of 1971, we packed up everything we owned. We didn't have any money, but we were headed to Oregon. So we made it. We spent 2.5 years in Eugene, Oregon, and as I fell in love with that little college town in Oregon, I decided, well, maybe what I ought to do is start my career in banking and work for a community bank in Eugene, and then I don't have to be transferred all over the state of Oregon with one of the big banks. Well, as I sat down with the hiring officer at this small community bank. He said, "Well, gosh, you got a pretty good education. What do you think you need to earn in order to come to work for us?" So I dug deep and I said, "Well, how about $1,000 a month?" And he sat back and he looked at me, and it was my first real recognition of some of the challenges of full-time employment. And he said to me, "Son, there are only two guys in this bank that earn $1,000 or more, and I can't make you the third." And I checked my box, and then immediately went up and accepted a position with U.S. Bank of Oregon up in Portland. And through a story that's not necessarily essential to my story, I had a good friend that told me about Seattle, and Seafirst Bank was looking for a financial analyst, and so since I wanted to use my MBA, which was in finance and with a second major in real estate, so I accepted it, and that began what has now been over 50 years of a love affair with the city of Seattle, with Washington State, Puget Sound, and all the abundant opportunities here to build a business, which was, interestingly enough, the goal that I had, which was find a place you really want to live, move there, and build a life and build a business. And so I wound up spending the next 18 years in commercial banking. And I had, I had a wonderful banking career. I entered it at a time when the U.S. banking industry was in a period of deregulation, opening up cross-state line opportunities, and so I was there at a really fortunate time, because banking turned from a seniority-based leadership to one which was based on merit. And as a result, I had working with Seafirst Bank, which was the largest regional bank in Washington at the time. I moved up through a real estate subsidiary, Seafirst Mortgage. I was head credit officer for Seafirst Mortgage. I became chief administrative officer for Seafirst and Mortgage, and then the bank reached out and asked me to come over and lead strategic planning for the bank as they looked at how they were going to migrate from being a regional to being a super regional. And so I put together a strategic planning team. We put together a great strategic plan, and then the bank hit a problem. And so at that point in time, they asked me to shift from being head of strategic planning to being chief financial officer. So I was, for several years, chief financial officer. And as it turns out, it led me into my exposure to investment banking, in that I worked with Solomon Brothers to solve the problem that Seafirst Bank had by selling the bank to Bank of America. And at that time, I migrated back to a first love, which was real estate, and was head of the real estate division for B of A in the Northwest for several years.
Cool. I like that. So one of the other things that you have talked about today and in the past that continues to rattle around in my head, and that's the question of hospitality versus care in the senior living space. And you've spent a lot of time talking about the hospitality side. I'm going to confess that we don't have time to completely arm wrestle it here, because I tend to be on the other side, and I think senior living is more healthcare than hospitality. So I want to hear about this.
Okay, well, I look forward to our debate on that, because
Good.
I know nothing that exists in the hospitality structure that is adverse to delivering quality care. And I think we can talk through that. But I look forward to convincing you that it doesn't have to be care or hospitality. It
Good.
can easily be both.
Good. Well, I'd love to have this as a separate conversation. I've got another one of these. One of the things I've come to believe in the media world, the conference world, is that we put a bunch of people on stage who all agree with each other. And I think that we don't learn very much for that. So I have challenged my friend Ken Dykewall to a debate, which he's agreed to do, on the ageism. Now, again, I saw him earlier this week at Senior Living Innovation Forum, and I will tell you that in talking a little bit about having this conversation, he and I are more aligned than I thought, because what he said is that he's pretty tired of the Ashton Applewhite version of ageism complaint, and that's the part I'm unhappy with. So anyway, so that'd be fun. We're going to work on doing a series of debates.
Well, I'd love to participate in that too, if you get a chance.
Good. Okay. Yeah. I think obviously, I think the people at NET ought to be doing more debates and stuff than just everybody agreeing to each other. Because I think there are a lot of things that are important to talk about. So the other thing I want to ask about, it sort of comes into a third area. I think that senior living operators play too nice with each other. I think that they should be more competitive. I, as the owner of Black Dog Capital, want to be so good I crush all the other active 55 people out there. And the reason I look at NVIDIA, right, this chip company.
Uh-huh.
If you were an employee, if you were a software engineer in the chip space, you were a hardware engineer in the chip space, you'd want to go, if you're going to go work, if somebody says, who do you want to go work for? I want to go work for NVIDIA. You make a lot of money, you do work on interesting things. If I came out and I said to the industry, who's the one company that everybody wants to go to work for? Nobody, I don't think you could put a name up on the board and say, this is where 80% of the people would want to work. Maybe LCS might come the closest to that.
Okay.
Imagine being so good that everybody wanted to work for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that only, and NVIDIA wants, if they see a graphic company that's coming close, that either inspires them to be even better or to go out and buy them. And essentially to crush the competition. I know it's not quite the same thing because we sell locally rather than globally, but I think that mentality is missing. What do you think?
Well, that's an interesting observation, and my instinctive reaction to that is, yeah, it's a very collegial industry. Everybody talks, everybody shares. And I think that comes with a certain amount of complacency. There are times when I have told people that if you can't make money in senior housing at this time, you shouldn't be in the industry.
Yep.
I believe one of the pitfalls of success is not being challenged, and frankly, that leads people to little interest in innovation, and sometimes that means people get stuck looking back as opposed to looking forward. And I have a feeling to a certain extent that we are slow to seize on opportunities for the boomer generation because we have been too comfortable dealing with their parents. And the boomer generation is a very different generation from our parents' generation. And there are ways we can serve them. There are ways that we can open up our opportunity for healthy aging through our industry that a lot of companies are almost stuck in, why do I want to do that? I got a successful business as it is. And they're not realizing, because they haven't really dealt with the boomer generation yet. They're not really recognizing how different it can be to serve them, number one. And number two, even more importantly, serve them the way they want to be served. And then number three, recognizing the difference between the boomer generation and their parents' generation in terms of aging. Boomer generation is not only the largest generation to benefit from healthcare and wellness, and so they have longer life expectancies, but it is the first generation to really have a significant portion of their generation which are facing aging alone as single seniors. The largest generation in terms of percentage of people who never married, the largest generation to experience gray divorce. And for those that are similar, in other words, widows or widowers as part of the generation, they're facing potentially a longer life without a partner.
Yeah.
And so I can't escape the fact that as good as this industry is, as much good as it creates, as rewarding as it is, that this industry has only served 12 to 15% of all U.S. seniors. The rest of them either are dedicated or committed to try and age on their own or move in with family.
Yep.
And my whole vision is focused around, I know what the rewards are. I've had those seniors come up to me and say, gosh, I wish I made this decision earlier. Or those adult children who have told me constantly that, thank you for giving me my parents back. I'm no longer having to try to deal with all of their concerns and their issues. I can now enjoy my relationship with my parents the way I wanted to and the way I was accustomed to.
Yeah.
And so innovating and finding those solutions to reach more seniors, particularly now that so many seniors are exposed to aging alone, the risks of isolation, and the challenges mentally and physically that isolation represents, and loneliness for mental health. We have opportunities. We can do it and scale and be strong competitively. We don't have to lose being nice to our competition,
Right.
And pleasant, but we can still beat their butt. And that's the opportunity that's out there for the next decade, at a very minimum, for organizations that are committed to innovation, that are committed to looking at our business through the eyes of our customer. Not how we want to serve them, but how they want to be served.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think for me, as a boomer right in the middle, it's going to be about people and being able to develop new friendships, maintain old ones. And I think that's going to be much bigger for this generation. I've got 5 minutes before I got to jump to another call. But one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is we've had, over the last 5 or 6 years, we've seen a number of senior living C-type people retire and sort of disappear out of the business. Here's the question I have. Can you name 2 senior living folks who've moved into senior living as a lifestyle choice? I say 2 because we know John Erickson lives in one of his buildings, so I have to exclude him. But I can't think of anybody else who's actually said, this is such a great product that I'm going to go live in it when my time comes. And I think that's kind of an indictment.
Yeah, I think it speaks to, I think the sense that once you move into senior living, you're going to lose your independence. And so many of the seniors that I've talked to who have tried to fight the battle of aging on their own, when I've pushed them on why and what do you think is the reason why you're interested in trying to age in your house. And it comes back to so many people identified with their home as the foundation of their independence. And I think, again, that's one of the things that's different about our generation, is that many of us have not had one home their entire life. They're not emotionally committed to it. But that is the opportunity to educate, to present a product which is exciting, where they can come through the door and say, hey, yes, I can live here. And look at all the people, happy people around me in that context. And I think that so much of what we do in traditional independent, full service, independent, assisted living, and memory care areas of the continuum is really bent on facilitating activities and wellness for seniors, all within the scope of the building. And that's not the way people live in their own homes, you know. And so the more we make ourselves, re-envision ourselves as an industry in terms of creating comfortable gathering areas, a residential setting that I like. I have my own space. I like it. It feels like my own home, and not other than size. But the more we can build our activity on, or our focus on activities around creating stimulating external elements, where instead of, as I often say, just as an explanation for active adult, the difference is that we had a great walking path at Merrill Gardens, and we would encourage our residents to go out and walk around the building, as opposed to saying, hey, I've got a hiking club and we're going to these different hikes. It's almost an external focus that maintains their connection with the external world, as opposed to letting it shrink into their world as the people in that building. We started with the belief that we weren't going to build care buildings. We were going to build residential buildings in which we could deliver care. And a lot of the early, it's hard to remember, but a lot of the early solutions for assisted living were buildings that were designed by skilled nursing architects. And so they were small units, they were limited unit amenities. And we didn't believe in that. I didn't believe in that. I believed in, frankly, in the fact that these should be residential buildings first, where someone could come and live the way they lived in their own home or in their own apartment or in their own condominium. And yet they could also receive all the benefits of living in a senior housing community, where they could get access to care, where they had gathering areas which encouraged socialization and stimulation, and also an element of wellness, where if I still remember well, one of the most impactful studies I looked at when early in Merrill Gardens' formative years, it was out of Boston. And it was a study that said that a typical 80-year-old could, through exercising 4 days a week, could double their strength and physical wellness versus a typical 80-year-old who didn't engage in fitness and exercise focus. And to me, that was the difference between sitting in a wheelchair or walking with a walker, or the difference between walking with a walker and walking independently. It promised less trip hazard and less trip risk. It allowed for much broader social engagement. So I don't know. I loved finding those little nuances that could make and distinguish Merrill Gardens. One of the early things we did, which I think now is more broadly available, is we didn't believe that seniors had an hour to eat in the morning, an hour to eat at lunch, and an hour to eat at dinner. That's not the way they lived at home, and so we implemented anytime dining, which means the dining room opened at 7 and it closed at 8:00, and a senior living in one of our communities could eat at any time. So if they had a doctor's appointment, they didn't have to worry about rushing back for lunch or whatever. So anyway, those were the things that in terms of building a business, I had a chance to shape, as opposed to having me and the banking industry shaped by what had preceded me in that position. So I'm very proud of what we built at Merrill Gardens, and it was a collective exercise. And today, I couldn't be more thrilled that Tana Gall has taken it over and continued to establish Merrill Gardens as one of the innovators and leading operators in the industry, building what they want to operate and what they believe is right. And I'm very proud of that legacy in that context. But again, I came to another point in my life for pivoting, and this family CEO, chairman who I worked with for 30 years, retired, and I had to ask myself again, do I want to start all over with a new family chairman? Or is this a time or opportunity where I can pursue the next passion in my life? And one of the things that happened during my 30 years with Merrill Gardens was increasingly buildings got more expensive. Obviously, we needed to pay our team members well. But increasingly, I saw what we started, which was accessible to middle-income seniors as well as more affluent, increasingly was becoming squeezed to the point where we still had a great business, still provide a very valuable and essential element of opportunity for seniors, but it was increasingly becoming just some more affluent seniors who could afford it, since it's all private pay. And so that's where I became fascinated in my last few years with Merrill, with a new passion. And that's what led to my decision to retire from Merrill. And then 30 days later, to be bored with retirement, because what I really wanted to do was play in the sandbox of how we create solutions for seniors, which is not a full service solution, but one which provides the most valuable elements of senior housing in an accessible form to more middle income seniors and to younger seniors. And so I talked my son, who had worked with us at Merrill and built a very attractive and award-winning multifamily business for Merrill, to joining me, and we jointly created Black Dog Capital Advisors, and we spent the first couple of years working with capital and working with operators, mainly in the operating side and the strategic side, working on value recovery for buildings during COVID that suffered for various reasons, from market to strategy to understanding how to compete in soft markets, and how to build value or recover value that was lost during COVID. And so that's been a very positive and rewarding element of the early entrance of Black Dog Capital Advisors to the horizon or to the field of senior housing. But by the same token, we were also working hard to raise a fund to develop this emerging new segment, which has so much promise for the boomer generation, which is active adult, purpose-built buildings, which are focused on building community, primarily for single seniors, but absolutely rewarding to couples as well. And the beauty of it is that we can do it in a way that is easily affordable for middle-income seniors. And so it's become now my new passion, and we're starting with our first few buildings, but still keeping our consulting business alive and working as part of this process. But as you can see, that's almost, I'm going on close to 50 years that I have worked on my careers, all three of them.
Yeah.
Not just one, but all three of them. And I couldn't be more excited about this third pivot that I've done. Then I'm just as excited as when I first started, when I got bored with banking and built a company, and now I'm on my third. So that's my career story, for what it's worth.
Cool. I like it a lot. I got a couple of questions. So the first thing, just sort of an observation, is you are so focused on the resident experience, the consumer experience, that it makes it hard to believe that you were ever a banker.
That's probably exactly why I got bored with banking. I wound up as a president and director of the bank that I finished with. And what I found my life was going to committee meetings, going to board meetings, meeting very few clients of the bank. It wasn't the biggest part of my day. And I love the ability to reach out and touch people. And so, yeah, banking, I enjoyed success. I mean, it was a wonderful career, but I never enjoyed banking as much as I enjoyed working with seniors. Not only is it a great business, but it is so rewarding. You change their lives, you really do. And so, yeah, banking was a nice first choice, but it wasn't meant to be my life work. So,
as I do interviews with people, and mostly as we tell stories, as we interact human to human, we tend to spend a lot more time telling success stories. And I love success stories. I love your story, but I want to actually I actually think we learn more from failure stories.
Mhm.
So I want to dig a little deeper into E.F. Hutton. What did you learn there? Because that had to be a very humbling, awful period of time in your life.
Yeah. At Hutton, it was a great lesson in terms of you can have a great company, you can have really good people, and yet there are external influences that can change and, frankly, change opportunities for companies. And I should have known that because when I was at Seafirst a couple of years before, Seafirst had a wonderful reputation. It was one of the top regional banks in the country, and its entire trajectory was changed by one division in the bank that got overly enthusiastic about energy, and frankly led to the reality that I had to explain to the new chairman of Seafirst, was that we were headed towards having to sell the bank. And so that was a great company. E.F. Hutton was a great company, but E.F. Hutton got trapped in the market collapse the same way that Seafirst got trapped in energy. So after each experience, I sat down and I made a list of notes that were takeaways from watching Seafirst go through this transaction, a very successful transition to what is now Bank of America. Yep. In Washington State, and then I watched Hutton go through that. I actually lived through it the same way, and so I made my notes about the attraction, the appeal of concentration in assets or types of business, and yet being cautious, always looking for where's that hole, that big hole that can drop in front of you that you can't control unless you're looking for it. Yeah. And so I always, in building Merrill Gardens, I always had that as a backdrop of looking for opportunity, but also being realistic and practical about the exposures of concentration and the market conditions.